the founder and my co-president at Academy. First of all, a very quick self-introduction. I am Yetian. I'm doing translation studies. So I feel humbled or even humiliated to myself here. From the angle of translation studies. Uh, um, before I introduce myself, I want to talk a little bit about what this talk will be like to give you an idea, so that if you feel you might be bored to death, you can save your life by leaving. But basically, translation studies adds a very new discipline. It's always finding ways of persuading people to talk to other disciplines about its existence. Really, I will be sharing at the end like how translation was perceived by a range of either in the public discourse or the academic discourse. But my sort of aim here today is to show you that the existence of translation in some of the topics that we all concern together. So now, self-introduction. Before I humiliate myself, I'm Yetian. I graduated from a PhD in translation studies from Queen's University, Belfast. I am now a scholar in residence, a visiting scholar here. Still looking for a job, but the good news is still yet to come. And I will present to you my colleague Wu Tong, who did her PhD in China. Wu Tong, are you there? 你在吗？
在。
我在。Yeah.
Hello。
Yeah, can you ask her again?
Wait, hello. 能听到我说话吗？
能听到。
Why don't you do it for her?
Yeah, but later she will need to talk. So, that I will use from my side. 可以听到我说话吗？Hello?
可以。
Laura, can she hear you?
这会儿听不到了。
Yeah， 可以听到我们说话吗？
现在可以听到。你们可以听到我。
Technical things are always a mess.
你们能听到我讲话吗
Yes.
She did a PhD, on this specific topic, from the School of Sociology in Yunnan University. So, we are all from Yunnan, and as some of our audience here, a very proud or sensitive sense of family hometownship are here while we're doing this project. And let me introduce you to our topic. wise man told me that I need to cater for our audience. Catering for our audience. So initially, the very beginning of the introduction is really about translation, but now it's about the Dulunjiang township. So it's a township located in China, in my hometown. And one of the reasons we decided to talk about this is really that this sense of belongingness and sense of sentiment of being introducing our hometown to your audience. So the township currently governs 6 villages, 41 village groups, and 1,037 households, and 4,153 people. So before 2014, the people, it's called Dulongjiang, so the people there are Dulong people, ethnic group, Dulong ethnic groups. So before 2014, the whole ethnic group was in deep poverty, with long-term poverty incidence of around 37%. And at least by the government's data, the entire ethnic group achieved poverty alleviation in 2018. So we choose this, as I said, partly because we are from mainland, so this is the case for my hometown. But also, for those who are interested in the top-down rural governance, this is so-called a political model for partly understand China's, governance in poverty alleviation. And another very interesting thing is that during our study, we constantly hear that this is a governance here doing the work of the people, and translation back to my expertise. Translation concerns the very problem of connecting people, of meaning making between people and between groups. So people as a key word, as we will see later, is another reason why we decide to collaborate really to see how translation work here. And so the ethnography is done by Tong, even though I think she cannot hear us. So I can put something behind her. But she and her team have conducted 5 field studies in Zhejiang Township in August to September 2019, May to July 2020, October to December 2020, June to July 2021, and July to August 2022. So these are not very long-term ethnography work, but it does provide us with some data to analyze, to have a knowledge of what's happening over there. Okay, now translation, the boring stuff, the theory that may, again, bore some of you to death. In translation studies, we take this as part of what we call the sociological term in translation studies, meaning that there is a constant effort of us translation. Well, I'm not using another discourse here of translation studies scholars trying to see the interdisciplinary work. I'll have a timer on. This interdisciplinary work between translation and to search the cooperation from sociology. Here I have listed Sergei Tunev, one of the pioneers in this term. His very first book is to explore how Luhmann can be used in the realm of translation studies. And then there's Sameh Hana, who explored how to use Bourdieu, and this has become a trend in translation studies, to use Bourdieu in understanding the translation of Shakespeare to Arabic. And then there's the Wenyan Luo, who's using the actor network theory to explore the translation of Journey to the West. But I would like to draw your focus on some of the projects that are done with translation and governance. So I have identified the international or even national level of translation working, or the projects exploring translation working on the national and international stage. So that's Renee, there's the Yuxia. So the first one is exploring a contemporary context where where translation is very important in governing the multilingual states, because states depend on communication. Translation is a very key tool to facilitate this kind of communication. While the second literature, Yuxia and Ricardo, is really looking at the translation act in Qing and Ming dynasty and see how translation works at that time. And then on a micro, more local level, there's the Sherry Simon, who's constantly developing an idea of translating cities. Concerning the cities, or even smaller groups of multilingual people and how they communicate with each other and how translation helps to facilitate the governance there. And finally, there's Wan Hong, who did an ethnographic work in Canada, because we all know the multilinguistic feature in Canada. So she's seen how translation policy is influenced by linguistic and multi-layered and multi-dimensional non-linguistic factors. With this quick review, we see that translation in all these cases are still concerning with the multi-linguistic groups. We're not claiming that in our case there's no multilinguistic group. There are, and actually the older generation there cannot understand or nor can they speak Mandarin. But because of our own language capacity, what we're mainly looking into is still a monolingual, so within a monolingual realm and how translation works there. But before I come further into translation stuff, let's jump back to the theories of governance, because what I want to do is to sort of bridge the elements or some of the concepts of governance and the corresponding concepts in translation, see how they talk to each other and how translation speak to it. I will do very quickly for this part because you might be very familiar with this. So first of all, the elements of governance, there's the image, a belief system, or a constructed knowledge about the government, the instruments that the resources that the government, all different actors. I said the government here, but now I'm thinking about different actors within the whole governance system. That they use to achieve governance goals, and then there's the action that is the employment of social, political capital. So leadership, for example, is one of the actions of governance that we will be talking about in a later phase. And then there's the complex system. So governance happens in a complex system, a system which is an example of many elements which are interacting in a disorderly way and resulting in robust organization and memory. So within this kind of system, it's really difficult to have a very clear cause and result link. So that's what called the non-linear nature of this kind of complex system. And also the complex system for governance features the surprises. So the interconnected systems contain poorly understood interactions driven by both positive and negative feedback and processes operating over a range of spatial and temporal scales. Notice that until now we are talking about elements, talking about systems, but one thing that's constantly emerging is the interact. So government is really, at least from a translational perspective, is really an interactive conversational act between the different actors or agencies within this whole axis. So, and then governance and network reaffirms this kind of interaction. So the network, this is just one of the examples of the many networks. Network really works as an umbrella term. And I see there's this attempt to build a network space. So giving you the idea of how broad the concept of network can be. So Williamson, this model is developed by Williamson to imagine and bottom up a network as governance. Rhodes talk about governance as a bargaining between the network members. Again, the importance of communication, of interacting as bargaining in this case re-emerges here. And then the Sorensen, but I'm not very confident of pronouncing this name, and Corbin also talk about actor networking as democratic governance. So what they say is that if we imagine governance as network, then the essential role of government can be somehow disseminated because the network allows other actors to talk. We will come back to that later. So now finally to jump back to translation, to the boring part. Different from probably most people would think about translation. Translation is, well, in our discipline, is no longer bounded by the interlingual transfer, and it's no longer be about reserve the sort of same meaning while translating from, for example, Chinese to English. One of the very posh definition of translation is that it is a entropic semiotic work in which any one or more of the components of a sign system or any one or more of the relationships between them are changed, or in which the relationship between the sign and its environment is changed. So in the original or traditional translation studies, we imagine there's a source text, which is the text that we translate from, and that's the target text in which we translate into. But if we think about translation as a biosemiotic process, then we should abandon the whole thing, but to adopt a new terminology, for example, the incipient at the sort of the starting point and the subsequent sign systems, which the signs are translated into. I think this new definition is what I may use to rethink about the sort of governance as translation as suggested by the title, because it thinks about the relationship as I emphasized, the interaction, the interpersonal, inter-agent relationship between, first of all, different components within a complex system, and secondly, it links a subsystem with another subsystem, one system with another.
Okay, where is inception coming from?
Well, the translation is imagined as a continuous process. So let's say in a semiotic theory, understanding is always happening, and we do not identify a very clear starting point of the whole understanding, or we say interpretative chain, but we identify part of the chain to see not one translate into another as a product, but rather to see how the process works. So the translation being this product. And I think this will be very important.
Your definition or somebody else's definition?
I quoted this from, I quoted part of this from Corpus Murray as a scholar emerging in translation studies. Now, I will have a list of references at the end, and I will point out some of the definitions over there.
So the key thing is the word pizza is from you, or
no, it's from Murray, and I will point out that one. Okay, I've wasted 10 minutes of your precious time. This torture will end. So the name here. Okay, so several links really about between translation and governance, and probably this might propose a new account of governance and translation beyond the linguistic transfer and multilingual governance of the cities or the state. First of all, we talk about image as one of the elements of governance, and image in translation is very important. Van Dorselaer have a book called Interconnecting Imagology in Translation. So in that book, they are talking about the image of the nation so the image of the nation within the literacy or the translation of the literature. I think this can also apply to any interaction between groups, so or even between agencies. So the second one, information theory, we talked about the resources of translation. So one of them are information. So in governance, or at least in the governance theory that I quoted, Kliman imagines that information should not be changed while they are delivered from one place to another. This reaffirms some sort of a conduit model in information theory. But what translation trying to do is to oppose the unchanging nature of information, of knowledge, of meaning, because as we see, translation is exactly the process that linking one spine system to another by changing by changing the relationships or change the environment, the meaning has to be firstly changed and secondly made. We will see how it is made. And then complex system translation always happens again in a complex system. This is not even to be said from a macro level, but even within single action of translation, the cognitive process is identified as a complex system. We always say that translation is transferring meaning, but as proposed by Schrev, translate a convenience label for a non-linear, again, the feature of complex system, non-linear pattern that emerges dynamically during the time course of a translation. And finally, the networking, this is even beyond, I think, obvious that translation is a phenomenon in which semiotic intervene relationship among social systems or subsystems. That every form of social reality emerges from semiotic interaction between human beings. Again, this in-betweenness, this relationship building, this interaction emphasis really lies, first of all, within the realm of translation and secondly in the governance. So I hope everyone is live. We will now jump into our case study. Before that, the whole, especially in the network governance, the whole emphasis is placed on democratic governance, imagining even a level power distribution between governance and the different actors within the network. But we're talking about a Chinese context here, and the Chinese context is still very, very top down. We will come back to this claim in later phase. So as you listen to we call it stories, really, two stories of the governing happening in my hometown, you will feel a very strong sense of the government and then the local power structure. But I think here we will go into the case study. So first of all, we have a case study of the environmental governance, which we use to re-emphasize a actor network as intersemiotic translation. So semiotics means time. So intersemiotic translation is the translation from one sign to another sign. Sign, well, I will explain the sign later. So I don't know if Wutong can hear me. If you can, the floor is yours.
哦，可以听见。
You are mute.
我可以听见。咦？现在听不见了。 Okay, now let me introduce the case. The forest understory planting industry, mainly based on 草果, is the primary source of income for the Dulong ethnic group. However, during the initial stages of the 草果 industry, the government's approach of providing free seedlings to farmers for individual trial planting did not yield good results. Some farmers received the seedlings and threw them into roadside ditches, while others sold them at low prices to other villagers in exchange for corn wine, which they could drink in one night. The root cause lies in the tension between the agricultural transformation goals embedded in the new 草果 planting industry and the traditional livelihood concepts of the Dulong ethnic groups. Historically, Dulong farmers have maintained a self-sufficient agriculture model based on slash and burn cultivation. Due to climate and soil conditions, local crop yields have been extremely low, with the saying planting a whole hillside yields only a basketful. Therefore, the primary purpose of agriculture planting for the locals has been to fill their stomachs rather than make money. The vast forests have been used for living off the land rather than planting. By collecting wild vegetables and medicinal herbs from the mountains, farmers can obtain food and immediate income. So their enthusiasm for the long circle 草果 is generally low. Initially, farmers perceived 草果 as a kind of grass that doesn't bear fruit. Since the leaves of 草果 are very similar to a type of grass found throughout the forest, people generally doubted the claim that planting 草果 can make you rich. The government's early promotion of tea, lacquer trees, and walnuts failed to translate successfully into economic benefits for the people, weakening their expectations for similar free projects. As a result, when the government tried to mobilize farmers to participate in planting by distributing free seedlings, most farmers chose not to participate, and the project faced difficulties when entering the village due to a lack of people taking responsibility for it. The breakthrough of the bottleneck relies on the interaction among grassroots government, local elites, and ordinary farmers. In 2007, Gao Derong, then the deputy director of the Standing Committee of the Nujiang Prefecture, People's Congress, and a Dulong cadre, moved his office back to his hometown and explored 草果 planting in an original forest called Sida in Bapo village to help more farmers understand 草果 and its planting techniques. The experimental base absorbed farmers by employing them, allowing them to work short-term jobs close to home and learn how to plant 草果 without bearing the risks and losses of trial planting failures. The success of the base made the participating farmers realize that 草果 is indeed a valuable golden fruit. After the successful experimental planting of 草果 at the base, the first batch of farmers who learned the planting techniques began to expand the Caoguo industry to their own forest land. The local government also started to mobilize farmers in mid to downstream villages suitable for Caoguo growth to try small-scale planting. Under the coordination of the township government and the Dulongjiang assistance team from the prefecture party committee, departments such as forestry, poverty alleviation, agriculture, and ethnic affairs worked together. On the one hand, they provided free Caoguo seedlings to farmers and conducted regular technical training for planting. On the other hand, they organized village cadres and highly motivated farmers to study and investigate in other places. And after returning, they encouraged villages' confidence and determination to plant Caoguo through personal experience. At the same time, in the village society where villages watch villages, households watch households, the masses watch party members, and party members watch cadres. Mobilization presents a sequence of relationships among village cadres, village elites, and ordinary villagers. In the process of pilot planting of Caoguo, village cadres always take the lead in mobilization. As the former secretary of Bapo village, Wang Guoguang, said, if ordinary villagers say that I don't do it, they won't do it either. I personally plant and lead them to do it. Based on this, village cadres often prioritize mobilizing politically capable people with party member status or easygoing young people. As a small-scale trial planting succeeded among farmers, neighboring farmers who had been waiting and watching also dispelled their doubts and began to let go and develop their own Caoguo industry. For local farmers, Gao Derong is a trustworthy person in everyone's opinion. Even young villagers say the old country chief has a good conscience, cares about us, and we all trust him. As a result, in 2017, the market price of Caoguo rose to 10 RMB, about $1 and 57 cents per kilogram, bringing considerable income to farmers with fruit-bearing trees. Farmers spontaneously began to expand Caoguo planting. By the end of 2021, the planting area of Caoguo in Dulongjiang Township reached over 70,000 mu, with a production value of 20.44 million RMB. Farmers per capita net income reached 15,000 RMB, with Caoguo income accounting for the majority.
If she muted on her side, it's not probably waiting 电话 would be a solution. I'll do a very, very short analysis really. So what we see here, only from a translational perspective, is this kind of different types of leadership happening while motivates the locals to grow the Caoguo. We are sort of focusing on the effects of translation rather than anything. So I have some text here. So again, if we come back to the Freeman leadership as an example of action revolves around the leader-follower interaction. Again, emphasize on the interaction. So in different circumstances, leaders motivate participants by empowering participants by the incentives, and in the systems where the leaders and follower relationships where the power hierarchy really is more obvious, like the case in China, then there's a more clear role of leadership. I think what you can hear from her story, from the story of this, is that there's simultaneously a horizontal and a vertical semiotic translation that's happening, where the 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 sorry, horizontal, where the horizontal one being that one village is comparing themselves really with another village. So, but while the vertical is that the everyday people, they sort of look at what the leaders are doing, political leaders are doing, and this is and we see that this vertical has many different levels all the way up to the leaders probably of the township. We didn't include the picture here, but actually there's all different kind of incentives happening here. So for example, the villagers when they come to learn about the temple, there's they have little gifts to take away, and they are very happy about those little gifts at the initial stage, and as claimed. And now it's more of a spontaneous reaction. They are kind of willing to grow themselves. And then, if we think about that part being how the network is formed in this specific case, the latter part will be on a more micro level, where we again go back to the linguistic things, where these meaning are transformed, changed, and made during this kind of intralingual translation, meaning that Chinese translated into Chinese. But then by doing so, there are always new meanings happening. And this time we are concerning a case on managing the residential environment, which I don't know if we can hear. I don't think she can hear us still, based on the.
Yeah, your mic is on. She should be able to hear.
Yeah, it's.
Can she give us a thumbs up or anything? So.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to reach her on the Zoom chat, but she's not answering at all. So maybe if you can check on WeChat.
Yeah.
Sorry about the interruption.
So reach out telephone on.
Yeah.
2 times.
Yeah. Let me wrap it up for everyone. So okay. This is again a top-down approach. So the government, the central government, Chinese government, have this kind of 3-year action plan of improving the living condition, call it, of the rural human settlements. So what we collect is actually a series of documents, ranging all the way from the broad political, the policy from the central government, all the way down to the individual village level. And we see that during this translational process, the policy become more and more contextualized and specific. And I think that this is quite obvious to say. So we have identified some of the main strategies in the environmental governance in this case. So the translation of rules being there's a broad concept that you have to manage your environment well. But in the village level, again, there are all sorts of punishment and there's all sorts of incentives combining the need of the villagers to make it work. And let me see what she has. Yeah, she has here. Yeah. So basically, they have introduced from the top-down level. They have introduced these kind of plans. So the 3 activities per week, daily household portioning and environmental function, red and black list. So employ a range of resources that we can have. So the latter one, for example, if you're not doing really well, you will be on blacklist. If you're doing really well, you're on red list. And then because everyone knows everyone within the village, then this becomes at the very beginning stage, it becomes very effective. And then the interest replacement, basically, if you're doing really well, you have this kind of points, and you can go to the supermarket, the supermarket to exchange for some commodities. And then the discourse. I think this is very interesting in some way. What we realized in one of the cases is that while the villagers feel that they lack kind of incentives, the cadres will use the broad central like discourse like the time stream, and they will be actually quite motivated by this kind of discourse. Again, we see the intralingual translation, but also based on this specific political and time background. So, but also there's this little bit part of this bottom-up policy making, which really make us quite interesting. So in this case, so they have this whole cleaning up every week, and it's quite voluntary. So what they see is that some households will be very active to participate, while others are not very active, and some even won't show up. So the villagers themselves organize this kind of or decide kind of policy that if you are caught, you're not participating, you will be fined 100 RMB, which will be used to buy the cleaning food and so on and so forth. And then the cadres get to know this policy and think, well, this is actually quite good and it's working. And then it becomes this becomes this top-down policy to implement in other regions. So this intralingual translation, we see that the documents are translated from national to the local level in what we call the intextualization, meaning that the text is taken out from its original context and recontextualized in another specific context. And then we also see this translating as an action thing happening. So we have this policy, but the policy eventually becomes an action. So this change, this term is actually employed in our everyday use of translation, right? We translate a policy into action. So, but this goes beyond the intralingual thing. Okay, so conclusion. Finally, you are the torture end, but I will need to find where my thing is, because I will need to make a very a confession, really, that while we're employing this discourse or this terminology of different actors, we seem to be cleverly imply that the actors are sharing the power, but we all know this is not the case, right? The strong top-down system is still influencing largely and in good or bad terms. And in translation studies, as the quote here, we should not really take this as a natural position, because translation or political translation addresses inequities, hindering democratic deliberation, and entreat powerful groups to work together more inclusively with disempowered groups. So we see this as a something that we don't have the answer to right now because of our data. But also we see that there are already questions circulating about whether this top-down narrative is really working as it is. For example, the resettling for poverty alleviation program already raised a lot of questions about the voluntarity of the villages, so on and so forth. We will be doing comparative studies after this, but because I mean, I'm here and she's got the job, so it's really difficult to have longer time to do the ethnography. Well, young lecturers nowadays. But we are hoping to use the winter summer vacation to collect more data, to do comparative studies, hopefully to review some of the underlying underlying things that's happening. But all in all, what we from translation, again, I am a translation studies scholar, so from a translational perspective, what we see is translation is always making meaning instead of what we think about, preserving, enduring linguistic transfer. And back to the very beginning, I said that there's always this kind of understanding of translation. And the reason that I, as a translation scholars, want to oppose it is in public or in academic discourse. Translation is constantly being visible only when it makes mistakes. But what we want to say here is that it's not necessarily the case. We see that translation is constantly making meaning. For example, in this governing process of this rural area, it does something, and it does something good, I hope. So this concludes our presentation. Thank you very much.
Question? Yes, Anna.
Hi. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really, really interesting. It might be a naive question because I'm not a translation studies scholar.
Yeah. No, for me, so.
But I'm interested in what are the grammatical units that are being translated? Is that the entire policy? Is that particular slogans? What are the units of translation? What is being translated?
Yeah, so I think that is the interlingual part of the environment. I don't have a translation English version of those documents here, but I think it's not necessarily the units, the linguistic units that's doing the case. It's basically the locals reading the document, taking the meaning out of it, and think, how will we write our own policy to ensure this intention being achieved? So we see this process being a translation, but it's not based on linguistic units. It's not based on that. And at the local level, actually, there are less slogans compared with the broad national level slogans that we are very, some of the slogans that we are very familiar with. So this is the interlingual translation that we are referring to.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I have a question about this interlingual translation that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose my question is, I feel like that form of communication that you're talking about has a long history in various forms, right, within China.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in why, or I guess, do you think that that history is relevant to what's happening in the case studies you're looking at? Or do you think that you're kind of picking up on a process of communication that's different? And that's why you brought in the idea of translation? Or do you think that concept of interlingual translation could be applied back to different forms of ideological education that have taken place previously? And I guess in link to that, do you think that that's another limitation of using translation studies theory that's Eurocentric or North America centric, in the sense that it doesn't make space for these particular kinds of communication that you're talking about, which are very particular to this form of like negotiated authoritarian government between centre and periphery, and standardized language in that context. So yeah.
For that question, I think what we're trying to do is a reapplication of the theory to indeed what's have all long been existing in specific China context. I'm not trying to say, well, there is a new thing that's emerging, that's translation. It is not. And if I can quote another question that is constantly being asked here in translation study is, it's not asking what is translation anymore, asking what is translation about this. You know, we are asking this exact question: what is translation now about this specific way of ideological communication? So yeah, I think, and in terms of the theory development, I don't. First of all, I acknowledge that there's this kind of Eurocentric theory development in our discipline, but in this specific case, I think they're quite explanatory to this case, because what we want to emphasize again is this kind of meaning making, even in ideological education, as an example. This from policy to specific educational context, the policymakers, the educators are constantly making new meanings while they're adopting this meaning from one place, one semiotic system to another. And I think this is the core of translation that we want to apply to, well, most of the cases in communication, political, ideological, or social or cultural